¿Y el otro? O sea,
No, está apagado.
1, 2.
Ah, no, perdón. Ah, muy bien. Hola, muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos nuevamente. Iniciamos con la segunda fase de conferencias de Joomla. En esta ocasión tenemos la conferencia Creando plantillas responsive para Joomla. En la siguiente conferencia, David Hurley nos dará un recorrido sobre la creación de plantillas para Joomla y la estilización a la medida de nuestro sitio web, adaptándolos a los requerimientos visuales del mismo. David dará un especial enfoque en la utilización de tecnologías como Bootstrap para que nuestras plantillas sean responsive, es decir, que sean adaptables a cualquier tipo de dispositivo, y nos mostrará las técnicas y algunos tips que conlleva hacer esto. Vamos a hablar un poquito de nuestro invitado. David Hurley es un experto programador web, dueño de Bootstrap, que es una compañía que se dedica a desarrollar sitios a la medida. Él ha trabajado con clientes de todas partes del mundo e incluso ha desarrollado sitios para el gobierno de Estados Unidos, desarrollando también sitios y aplicaciones para el manejo de proyectos y de relaciones con clientes para su utilización en Joomla. David además es un entusiasta de Joomla y ha colaborado con el proyecto desde su creación en el año 2005 y actualmente está a cargo de Community Development Management de Joomla, lo cual lo liga directamente con los ciclos de liberación de Joomla, ya que está a cargo de los mismos. Queremos darle un especial agradecimiento a David en este evento, ya que él mismo fue quien propuso su participación y ha cubierto los gastos del viaje, pues reconoce la importancia de la difusión de Joomla y le interesa especialmente el desarrollo de nuestro grupo en Guatemala. Adelante, bienvenido.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo David y no hablo español. I will speak in English. I will try to speak slowly and try to be clear. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. It is an honor and a privilege. I have greatly enjoyed my time so far, and I am looking forward to many conversations with you. And as Paul mentioned earlier this morning, I look forward to answering any questions you may have. As Paul mentioned, I work more specifically with the production side of things, with the production leadership team, so handling the code and the development of the code. But I also work in helping people find how they can get involved with Joomla. So we've had a couple of great sessions today in regards to responsiveness, and it's been quite exciting to see how it has progressed throughout the day. Most recently with the talk on responsiveness and Bootstrap, and I would like to continue that talk with responsive templates created specifically for Joomla. So I would like to ask, how many of you have created a template for Joomla of any kind in the past? Okay. So I'm going to build a little bit on that knowledge that you might have already, and we'll kind of look at how to incorporate Bootstrap into those templates. When creating a template for Joomla, does anyone know how many files are necessary when creating your template? How many files you must have? If you think you need more than 20 files to create a template, raise your hand. Okay? If you think you need more than 5 files to create a template for Joomla, raise your hand. Okay. If you think you need less than 5, raise your hand. Okay, good. You need 2 files to create a template for Joomla. Most specifically an index file and a template details file. So what we'll do is we'll also look at the extra files and folders that you can have in your template but that are not required for your Joomla template to install. We spoke a little bit in the last session about less and CSS, and I think Guillermo also spoke this morning about less. You can have an images folder. You can have an HTML folder for handling overrides. How many of you are familiar with HTML overrides in Joomla? Okay, so Joomla ships with components. How many of you are familiar with COM content in Joomla? Great. How many of you are awake? I know lunch was good and you want to take a nap, but you must stay awake. This is exciting. This is fun. And then there's also JavaScript that you can add into your template as well. So the first thing that we're going to look at when creating a template for Joomla is we'll look at your template details. In your template details XML, you'll start by adding a declaration at the top. And this declaration basically defines what type of file that we have, as well as what version of Joomla we're looking at. In this case, you'll see on the last line, I have a version 3.0 for a type of a template, and the method equals upgrade. And I can go into more detail about each of those variables or attributes and why we use them if you're interested later. But for right now, what I'd like to do is kind of go through briefly each of those files, and then we'll actually look at writing some of the code itself. If we continue down the template details file, after we have added our initial header block, we'll begin to define some basic details. And here's where we're going to name our template. We can put in some details about the creation date, the author, how to contact the author. You can also put copyright in here, as well as version and description. And notice that in the description, you can use HTML to build out a description that actually has HTML elements in it. After the basic details, we have a files block. And again, I know I'm going quickly through these because I think what's probably more interesting is actually working with it. So I want to show you first of all what's in the file, and then we'll actually go into an actual development looking at each of these individual. The ones in green that you can't hardly see up on the projector screen here are the ones that are not necessary but can be present. And it's important to note that when we're defining files here, what we're doing is we're telling Joomla when it installs the template what files are present, and then Joomla will know what to do with those files. If you see the first two say file name, and then we name the file, the last three say folder, and we actually have a folder name. So in the installation, I don't have to name anymore every single file. I can simply name the folder, and Joomla will automatically parse through every file within that folder. After we have a files block, which tells Joomla what files we're installing, the next piece that we'll have are the positions. This tells Joomla what positions are available in the index.php file, which we will look at in a second. The positions can be named whatever you like. Oftentimes you'll see position -0, position -1. You can name them as I have done here with top, footer, left, right. What you name them here can be anything you choose. And what happens is when we're looking in the admin panel of Joomla, this will be in the drop-down list for the available positions. And then in the index file, we're going to put these modules in place and then call them. So now in the index.php file, so again, we have two files present. We have template details.xml and we have index.php. The first thing we do in the index is to set a defined jexec or die. Anyone know why we have that file at the top? Okay, let me explain. When we put this file at the top, we say this file can only be accessed from within Joomla. What this does is it prevents hacking from occurring on the site and on the file. So every file that's PHP based, you want to begin by defining jexec. This says only run this file within a Joomla setup. So index.php, option equal com, through the Joomla application. Next, we'll define a standard doc block, HTML. And then beyond that, inside the header tag, we will include the JDoc include type. And this is where Joomla is going to then put in all of the necessary header information that's parsed out throughout the system. So through various components or modules or plugins, information will be injected into the header. JDoc include type head is what will place that in your index file of your template. After we've gone through the head, we go into the body of index.php. And for this very basic example, we simply are going to define each of the module positions. So you'll notice that I have defined each of those positions that I previously declared in the template details.xml. You'll notice that they all have include type of modules, except for include type equal component. The component is where the main part, sorry about that. The component is where the main portion of your Joomla site is going to load. So that would be com content, com contact, third-party extensions. All of those will load up within the include type equal component. And we've closed out the file with ending the body and ending the HTML. Now what we want to do is, so we have our index file, very basically defined here. We have defined no CSS, we have defined no JavaScript, and no images. So if we were to actually flip over now and look at a sample of code, let me show you what we would be looking at. Okay, so it's hard to see on this screen. What we have is the template details XML, which we had looked at previously, and this is all of it listed out. And again, you'll notice that I have my files declared and then my positions declared. If I look in my index file, I simply have declared each of those modules. So basically, this is all the information. Beautiful. Can you see that better? Okay, good. This is everything that was on that slide in the previous bit. This is where it's actually been saved out. So then what we would do is we would install that file. Okay, and to walk through that process, we can either zip up those two files and then install this zip through the extension manager, or I can do it through the discover method. Is anyone unfamiliar with the discover method? If you'd like me to talk about the discover method, raise your hand. Okay. So it's a nice handy little feature that if you have your files and you have already uploaded them to your server directly, but not through the extension manager, you can use the discover method to find them. So basically, and that's actually, when I was setting up this demo, that's how I did this. Because I actually put my template files into a Git repository, and then I symlinked into the templates folder so that I could keep track of all my version stuff. And then what I do is you come in here, and they will not show up now because I have already installed it, but you would click Discover up in the top toolbar. When you click that, Joomla is going to go through each of those folders and look for anything that's new. And when I did this previously or earlier, it will show the template in here. And then you simply select the line and click on Install. And it will install it for you directly from already existing on your site. So it is not necessary to use the install manager here and upload a zip file. You can actually just upload the files directly into your templates folder. Once it's installed, it will show in your list of templates. Okay? And so now if I go to the front part of the website, that's what it looks like. Okay? Because I haven't defined any CSS, I haven't defined any JavaScript, and I haven't really put any HTML in there either. I have simply output all of my module positions and the component. So you can tell by looking at this sample, I have top and then breadcrumbs, and then I have left, components, right, and footer. If I come over here, I can see I have something in top, something in my breadcrumbs here area. Here's my main content, and then I apparently have something in the right module position as well. So now the next step is, okay, where do I go from here so that it looks pretty? And this is where we get into the responsive part of it. And this is actually pretty exciting. If you look at the next bit that we want to do, we want to add the Bootstrap styling in. Now, if you're not familiar, there is a folder in the media part of your Joomla installation that says JUI, Joomla User Interface. And if you were to look in that folder, which we can do in a second, you'll find that we have present there an entire compilation of less files. We have a good number of CSS files and JavaScript files. In my template, I'm going to add that line. And that's it. I'm going to add one line. I'm going to say JHTML Bootstrap, load CSS, and include the main CSS. And then if I add that in, so I'm going to cheat just a bit. One second, I think this should stay. So I have this all stored in the GitHub repository, and I have gone ahead and created this So basically, I have this available so that you guys can actually see this after the fact as well. So you will have access to this repository. I'll give you a link to it. And I have tagged each of these steps. So now what I can do is I can go and check out step 2. So now I can cheat. And now I didn't have to write all the code, but it's already there for me. So now what I've done, this is the index.php file that we were looking at before, where previously all I had was my modules and component listed out. Now I have a lot more in here, but we're going to just look at a couple little pieces of it real quick. This first block of code right here, what I'm doing is I am checking to see if I have modules in my left or right position. If I have modules in my left or right position, I'm going to modify the span. That way, the CSS and HTML will know how much of the room it's supposed to take up. As you saw in the last session, we know that we're on a 12-block grid. So what we're looking at is how do we divide three sections into equal parts. So basically, my first line of code right here says if I have something in my left and right-hand module positions, then I want the main width to have a span of 4. If I have something in my left or right, so one or the other, I want the main area to have a span of 8. And if I don't have left or right modules, I would want it to have a span of 12. So again, I want it to always add up to 12. I have defined down further in this file that if I have a left module present, it's in a span 4. If I have a right module present, it's in a span 4. So obviously, if I have both of them, then my middle one must also be 4. Inside the head tag that we were looking at previously, underneath the JDoc include type head, I've added the one line necessary: Bootstrap, load CSS, and include main CSS. And we'll get into the rest of everything down here in just a second. It's very similar to what you saw in the last session with responsive, because again, the beauty here is that the HTML stays the same. I don't have to create all new HTML every time. So simply put, now when I refresh the page, now I have a really pretty layout. And if I look at the source code of my page, you'll see that it has added in for me the Bootstrap min CSS, the responsive CSS, as well as an extended and all the jQuery necessary. So I didn't have to manually add all of these style sheets or all of the JavaScript. I added one line of text into my document, and Joomla does the rest for you. So it's added in all of the necessary information and given me a very pretty layout. You'll notice here that I have my main navigation. I have a hero block at the top, which is a common Bootstrap functionality. I have my breadcrumb, and then here's my main content and a side module. If we look into the actual code, Just as you saw in the last session, we have a navigation block, and in the middle of all the navigation block, which again is standard Bootstrap markup, we have one JDoc include type modules. This JDoc include type modules is the one line of text that was in my original, or step 1. And all I've done is added standard HTML around it. The same thing holds true for the header area. Previously, I had just the JDoc include type modules with a name of header. And now what I've done is I've added a header ID and then a div class around it as well. And notice here that I've used div class hero-unit, and that is the Twitter Bootstrap styling that applied. The if this count modules header says, okay, if there's something in that position, display this block. If there's nothing in that position, that entire block will not show. So I won't have an empty block on the website. It will simply collapse and none of this HTML will be present on the page. We do the same thing for breadcrumbs. And again, we're using standard Bootstrap markup, nothing special. And then in this section here, we're looking at the main component. And again, as I discussed previously, we have an echo main width for the class of the component div. And that class comes from the very top of this file where we decided whether there was something in left and right, left or right, or neither. And then we have a footer down at the bottom. So again, I don't have to know a whole lot of Joomla to be able to create this file as it is right now. And because of the resolution, this is actually displaying in a mobile layout or an iPad layout. If I stretch this so that it thinks that it's in a wider layout than it is, you'll see that I get the menu bar in place at the top. And if I click around, so the menu itself is coming from the module in the top position. So if I go under my extensions, and this is in the admin panel of Joomla, and I go under Module Manager, I have Main Menu in the top position. If I open that up, I can see my position right here. And my template, in this case, I called Sample. So looking under the Sample heading, I see the positions, and these were the positions I defined in the XML file. These are also the positions that are defined in the index.php file. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So I pick what position I want this module to appear in. I didn't want it to have a title, because again, I want it to flow in line at the top here. And then I saved it. And that was all it took. Okay? This position and this position are the same thing. So I can come in here and I can say, okay, newsflash. Newsflash is in the header position, which if you remember from the index.php file, that header position is inside the hero unit div class, which is from Bootstrap. So basically, we're pulling a newsflash out and we're displaying it in this top position right here. Okay? Same thing for the side module. You can see right here, it's in the position right. And that comes over here into the position right. Okay? I used in the index.php file, at the very top, there was one line that I ignored in case you didn't see it earlier. It says app equal jfactory get application. Okay? That gives me some basic details about the application that Joomla is currently running as. I use that so that inside my brand tag, which again is a Twitter Bootstrap markup, I can get the site name. So from here, I'm getting the configuration value for the site name, and that's what displays up in the top left. So if I named my site something different, it changes the site name based on what I put in the admin panel. Okay? So, just like that, you didn't have to know very much Joomla at all. You can create a Joomla template. It took 2 files, an index.php and a template details. From that, we were able to put together a pretty nice looking website, which is fully responsive, just like we saw previously. So I can bring this all the way down. And just like we noticed in the last session, the right module, which was a span 4 on the right-hand side, flows to the bottom. But it's missing a couple things, like the menu's gone. I don't see a menu at all. And I don't see any way of making any real adjustments to the template. It's basically just pulling in that Bootstrap style. And I notice when I'm in a full-scale resolution that I have a little bit of a problem with my header area here. It's almost like it's floating up underneath that menu, and I really need to have that brought down some. So what we'll do is we'll step forward a bit in the code, and now I'm going to add in a little bit more. So now in my index.php, I have defined my document, and I have pulled out a nav color, which says this params get nav color. That tells me I need to go look at that XML file a bit more and see what's been added in new to that XML file. Now in my XML file, you'll notice that under the Files section, I have a folder called CSS. I've added that new one in. Also, if I look further down here, I have a config section with a field set named params, and inside that called advanced. Inside that I have navigation color with a description and some options. So I can go and look now in the admin panel and see what that's added in. So if I come back over here and I go into my template manager and I open up sample template. So first of all, these are all just standard fields. I could change the name of the style here, but I'm going to look at the options. Under options now, I see that I have a drop-down value here called navigation color, default or inverse. These options are pulled from that XML file. So I could add in all sorts of values here for all sorts of different variables. And if I list them here, they'll be available in the admin panel. So then the end user can make changes to the template without ever having to edit any HTML. So if I were to come in here now and choose inverse for the nav color and save and close that, now I have a black bar at the top, which comes straight from Twitter Bootstrap again. So how did I do that in the code? Well, we know how that value gets set. The template XML file, which gets loaded up into the admin panel. They select inverse from there. And then we started to see in the index.php file this nav color, where I'm getting the parameter value for nav color. If I scroll down into the navigation, you'll see right here I have PHP echo, nav color. If it's equal to inverse, then I want to also display out navbar dash inverse, or I won't display anything. Okay? So now, if I look at the source code of this page, you'll see that it has added in navbar inverse because I checked the parameter, and if it was equal to inverse, that meant that I should display navbar inverse in the file. That make sense? Okay. So now you are able to make changes to the website, changes to the template, to the look and feel of it, without ever having to get into the code itself once you've defined it and set that up. A couple other things that we had seen before that were a problem with the site were that the header was floating underneath that top menu. So you'll see here that we fixed that. Well, the way that I fixed that was because in our XML file we have this new folder called CSS. I can now look, and in my template I have a new folder called CSS. And I created a file called template CSS. Now you could name that file whatever you wanted to, because again, you don't have to define every file, you define the folder. So I named the file template.css. In that file, I put 3 lines. And if you're familiar with the Twitter Bootstrap responsive markup, or just any type of responsive markup at all, this will look familiar. Basically, I check to see if I am over a minimum width of 980. If I'm over a minimum width of 980, then I want to put a padding top on the body of 60 pixels. And that moves it down beneath this. So if I take this out, so now it's commented out. Now you see it got shoved back up underneath there. Okay, so by putting that text in there, and if I were to take out the specificity of it only showing when I'm over a certain width, it looks great here, right? But now when I start messing with the responsive element and making this smaller, now all of a sudden I have this massive 60 pixels at the top. That's because of the way Twitter Bootstrap handles the padding that is done natively by Bootstrap CSS. So what we want to do is we want to only use 60 pixels top padding if I'm over a certain size. So here I say if I'm over that 980 pixels, which is the Bootstrap determination for which to show iPad weather standard, if I'm beneath that minimum width value, I don't want to use a padding top of 60. And you'll also notice now that in my index file, I've added in a button inside the nav bar. And it says icon bar. It gives a couple of icon bars in there. It tells me that it's a toggle collapse, and the target is the nav collapse. So what happened now is it knows what size I'm on. It's the same Joomla menu. I didn't have to change anything in the admin panel, but it'll automatically change the layout for it based on my size device. Okay, so that's all Twitter Bootstrap. I didn't have to do any of that with Joomla or with code. It's handled all natively for me, but what we're doing now is building it dynamically. So as opposed to just having an HTML file, like what we looked at in the last session where we were coding all of the responsive elements onto the page, now what we're doing is those responsive elements are on the page, but the data is being drawn out dynamically from the Joomla database. And again, you'll notice my side modules down here at the bottom. Now, we can also use Bootstrap styling. Now that I know that I'm including Bootstrap in my template, we can use that in the admin panel of Joomla. So if I go into the admin panel, and I go into the modules, and I go to that side module that is now at the bottom of the page in this layout. If I stretch this out a bit, maybe we can get that to show up on the side. Under my advanced options, I have a module class suffix. This allows me to add different classes to the divs that surround that module position directly from the admin panel. So I can come in here and I can put in well, which as you saw in the last session was a Bootstrap style that would give it a border and a background color and look like it's inset a bit. I can apply that here to my module position. And now you'll see that it's over here in a side module with the well applied. So just like that, without having to edit the code, it's including all the Bootstrap stuff for me. All I have to do is know what values are available to me, and then I can use those in my code. And the same as what you saw previously. If I don't want something to show in a particular size, I can also add in the other elements. So some nice features here are instead of having to put everyone that I want it hidden for and everyone that I want it visible for, I can actually use one term and it will know what to do with it automatically. So I don't have to put hidden phone and hidden tablet. I can just say visible desktop. If I say visible desktop, Twitter knows, the Bootstrap knows, don't show on tablet or phone. And if I say hidden desktop, it will show on tablet and phone. So does that make sense? There's a list of them. So on that resource that you saw in the last session, I believe it's under responsive scaffolding. Thank you. And then responsive design. There is a great little chart right here, which will show you what tag will hide it or show it in what view. So it's a really handy little tool. When I'm developing stuff, I keep the Twitter, Bootstrap, GitHub open all the time because I don't remember any of the styles. I just have to go look them up every time. And there's always new stuff that's getting added too. So it's always important to keep up with what's being added. So now basically what we have done is we've been able to create an entire website with a pretty nice layout that's responsive, looks good on every size device. I added 3 files in this case because I wanted to change the padding a bit. And it's a Joomla template. So it'll pull in all of my data from Joomla. So now, just like that, you can be a Joomla template creator. In one of the earlier sessions, we were talking a bit about, well, how do I incorporate those resources into my component? You can do it the exact same way. So that one line that I include up here in my index file, for loading CSS, I can actually load that in a component as well, and then ensure that I have Bootstrap available within my component. And again, what it all comes down to is how you label your divs and using the proper markup or markdown language. So, have I gone incredibly too fast? Great. No answer. Yes. Are there any questions? I really like to interact, which is always more difficult when there's some language barrier, but I have found that it works really well. We can certainly work through any difficulties. So if you have questions regarding Joomla templates or components or pretty much anything Joomla from a development standpoint, I can do my best to answer, but I can't guarantee that I know. Any questions?
If I'm working on a website that monetizes through banner ads, how do banner ads fit in responsive design? I mean, like the header banner. How would you fix that going into a responsive design?
So, are you using the banners component within Joomla currently?
No, I haven't started doing the website yet.
So that's a really good question because there's some debate on with responsive elements. If it's hidden in a certain view, does it still get displayed or called out from the database? And currently, yes. So even though it does not show, so if I say hidden tablet on something, even though it doesn't show on the tablet, the server has still processed that code and has run it. So technically, in that instance there would be a case where you might have a banner that you have charged an impression for, but it does not show up. So there could be some problem there. So it would be wise to either plan for that in a PHP code side so that it doesn't display. So again, the processing would be on the server side, not the client side. So you wouldn't handle it simply with using the hidden or show side. You would have to account for it for every view.
Okay, but that kind of doesn't solve my problem or answer my question.
Okay.
I mean, how can I show, because the site monetizes through the sale of banners. So obviously I would want the banner shown, or publicity, any ad shown on the responsive website. So I mean, do you change the sizes? What's being implemented?
You would not have to. If you just left off the hidden show, whatever, it's always going to show. So in this case here, I have the side module here. That shows in every view, regardless of the size. If you don't specify a width and a height on your image, it's going to be resized dynamically to fit. Now, that's not the ideal way to handle that, because obviously you don't want to be doing resizing of images in the browser, but for something like that, it would certainly work and not be a problem. And then the ad would show on every size display, regardless. So, for example, in this case right here, I've shrunk this all the way down. The ad still shows. If you wanted the ad to show above the content, you could do that as well.
All right, thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay. That is awesome. I did not know I was that good that I answered all of your questions.
Okay. So on last conference,
Yes.
Victor told us that when we want to customize the colors, we download Bootstrap specifying those colors. And by now the site you just built looks like Bootstrap.
Right.
For example, if I want to change the world class to a brown color or something?
So the way that I would handle that personally is I would handle that through my template CSS, and it depends on the order that I've got it in, as well as the specificity that's involved. Oh, I was looking at there. So the way that I would handle that would be using the template file instead of, and the only reason I would say that is because so many of those files already exist in my site media. Since I already have all of these files available to me and I only want to modify parts of it, I would use the template CSS or another style sheet override to do that. Does that make sense? Okay. Very bright. Yes.
In HD screens, how is Bootstrap working?
In what? I'm sorry.
HD.
HD. So very big monitors.
Yes.
That's a great question. When I develop on two 30-inch monitors side by side, so I never stretch it full browser. So you can set up fluid designs, and it will stretch the entire way. That's a disaster. It wouldn't work very well at all. You can also specify them within containers and specify the width of the container, which is more typical. So in most cases, it'll be a 1050 pix wide that it would show on, and the rest is empty lost space. Yes.
If we have like Twitter is just like a website, and for smartphones they use sort of applications for each one of them of those phones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this case we have to change the code for each application, or the application grabs the PHP, the XML files, or how it handles that.
So there's two lines of thought there. The first is the real question: do you want to create an app for every operating system? So right now we've got Windows phones, BlackBerry, Android, iOS, right? So option one is to create a unique application for each of those, and you can use a tool like PhoneGap or other tools, which will take HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and it will port it into an app that's installable on each of those native devices. That's one solution. But I would propose that a better solution is that you use a mobile responsive layout like this, and then you simply give them the opportunity to bookmark that on their mobile device. So I know for a fact on Android and iOS, you can make it so that when they view it on their mobile device, you can actually have a little pop-up that shows up and say, would you like to add this to your home screen? When you add it to your home screen, and then you load that the next time, it looks a bit like it's a native app. You don't have your URL bar at the top as if a web browser, but it's truly just a web browser that loads up. So the benefit of that is that it's instantly available on every device. Just like that, you've created an app, web app, that is useful on whatever operating system you have. So more and more things are shifting that way. And one of the good reasons for that is if you look, Samsung is a very large producer of phones and tablets. Recently, they said, I think it was announced, they have 96 different screen sizes. So if you're going to create an app that's specific for each screen size so that it looks just right on each one, you're creating 96, and that's just Samsung. And then you have the iPhone, and then you have the Retina display, and then you have the iPad Mini, and it becomes very quickly too much to try to manage through a dedicated app if you can create it with a web-based application instead. And part of that is my personal opinion. I think I'm lazy. I'm a coder, and so I'm very lazy, and I want to find the easiest way to do things, and the easiest way is to have a web-based app like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think my time is actually just about up. So real quick, let me give you a couple of links if I can find them. Okay. The sample template that we just went through is located on GitHub. That's the URL for it. If you can't see it, you can ask me later and I can give it to you. And then the second link was the same one that you saw in the previous session regarding Bootstrap. And like I said, I bookmark that and I have it open in one of my tabs all the time. And please do contact me. I really want to answer your questions. And again, I may not have all the answers, but I would love to talk to you. These are the common ways in which you can reach me: Twitter, Facebook, Skype, and email. But I have other methods as well. So whatever works best for you. And while I'm here, please take advantage of it. Come up and talk to me. And thank you very much.